The phone vibrated and then stopped. The last message: "I'm going to eat with Sarah." That was the last time Adrianne Reynolds, a 16-year-old who had recently moved to Illinois from Texas, had spoken to anyone in her family. Adrianne was the kind of girl you'd notice in a crowd. Dark brown hair, piercing eyes, and a smile that was a little rakish, but endearing. She had been an active student, interested in theater and alternative rock. After moving in with her father in East Moline, she quickly made friends at the Black Hawk Vocational Center and seemed to fit in well. Among her new friends, the most prominent were Sarah, a strong-willed, somewhat mysterious girl, and Corey, who had been a constant presence by their side. January 21st, 2005 was overcast and bitterly cold. Adrianne disappeared after school without a trace. Her room was neat, her schedule hadn't changed, not a single late text, not a single goodbye. And the strangest thing of all, when asked one last time, when they saw Adrianne together, each of their close friends answered differently. So what really happened after that fateful lunch? On January 21st, 2005, around 11 a.m., Adrianne Reynolds was last seen at the Black Hawk Vocational Training Center in East Moline. It was a Friday, and students were allowed to leave at noon if they had completed their classes for the week. Adrianne, along with Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory, are believed to have left the center together. The three traveled in Sarah's car, heading toward a nearby business district. According to later accounts, they stopped at a Taco Bell for lunch. Some employees at the store recalled seeing three teenagers, including a brunette who appeared uncomfortable. However, they did not record exactly when the group left. After lunch, the trip was supposed to end there, but instead of returning home or to school, the group turned into an empty parking lot near an industrial area south of the city. It was a secluded area, usually only occupied by trucks at night. This is where the timing and accounts began to differ. Sarah said that Adrianne had called someone else to pick her up. Corey said that they left Adrianne there because she wanted to walk home. But a local delivery man, passing by the area around 1:15 p.m., reported seeing three teenagers arguing next to a silver-gray car, a detail that matched Sarah's car. However, he did not stop because he thought it was just a normal student conflict. That afternoon, Sarah and Corey returned to school as if nothing had happened. Some classmates remembered that Sarah was unusually quiet, while Corey did not show up for class as scheduled. In particular, a student named Sean McKittrick, who Sarah had invited to go with her that afternoon, recalled that he had initially been invited, but then suddenly canceled for no apparent reason. When Adrianne failed to return home that evening and failed to show up for her shift at Checkers, her family began calling her. Tellingly, when she called Sarah, she was cold and replied that she didn't know where Adrianne was. However, old text messages between the two revealed that they had had a long history of conflict, something that had never been shared with anyone at the school. On the morning of January 22, 2005, a maintenance worker found what appeared to be a school jacket stuffed into a trash can behind the school. Although there were no visible signs of damage, the location of the item made the school administration suspicious. They began checking cameras around the school, but by then, the previous day's footage had been automatically overwritten by the system due to storage limitations. A student at the school said that they saw Sarah and Corey together near the backyard after lunch that day, which had no cameras, but was adjacent to a small wooded area behind the school. As all the clues began to fall into place, something strange became clear. The last people to be with Adrianne were all telling different stories, but they all avoided a time period that stretched from 12:30 to 2 p.m. 6:15 p.m., January 21st, 2005. Adrianne Reynolds did not show up for her shift at the fast food restaurant as usual. She did not text to report being late, nor did she return any calls. Her father, who had just taken her in for a few weeks, began to feel uneasy when he asked friends about her whereabouts, but no one knew. At 7 p.m., he called the East Moline Police Department to report her missing. The police quickly took action because the victim was a minor with a good academic record, no criminal record, and a recent transfer. On the morning of January 22nd, a janitor at Black Hawk High School, where Adrianne attended school, found a women's jacket in a trash can behind Building D. It was the type of jacket Adrianne often wore to class. There was no blood or tearing, but the way it was left caught the attention of investigators. It was near a backyard where there were no security cameras. That morning, police compiled a list of Adrianne's last contacts. The first name that came up was Sarah Kolb, a classmate at the center. Sarah said the three of them, she, Adrianne, and Corey Gregory, had gone to lunch together, then went their separate ways. Corey said the same, but added that Adrianne appeared to be waiting for someone to pick her up. There was no evidence to support that. Adrianne had not been seen leaving with a stranger. There were no security cameras. No taxis, buses, or acquaintances had called to pick her up. Everything seemed to have stopped by noon that day. On January 24th, police interviewed another student, Sean McKittrick, who said Sarah had initially invited him to lunch that day, but he abruptly canceled without explanation. It was the first time Sean had been left out of lunch, as he had been for weeks. This detail, though small, began to make police suspicious. Had Adrianne's companions been pre-selected? When police checked the cameras at Taco Bell, the place where the group had eaten, they found only a short clip. A silver sedan believed to be Sarah's left the parking lot with 3 people. But when they returned, only 2 were in the car. No one knew when Adrianne left. On the afternoon of January 26, a hunter called the hotline. He said that while hiking near Aledo, more than 20 miles from the original scene, he had seen char and what looked like charred bones under a tree. Investigators rushed to the scene. They found scattered human tissue, charred bones, and a few personal items. That was the moment any hope of finding Adrianne alive officially ended. The case had now become a full-blown criminal investigation, and the last people who were with the girl are no longer witnesses, but prime suspects. Initially, there was only a pile of scattered ash and a small bone fragment discovered by a hunter. But after a thorough search of the area, the police gradually collected more bone fragments and soft tissue, enough to determine the identity through dental records. There was no blood at the scene, no sign of a struggle, but there was one item that caught their attention: a black, charred leather belt lying a few meters away from the pile of ash that did not belong to the victim. The belt was not intact, but the metal clasp could still be identified in its original shape. On January 27, the preliminary results of the forensic examination showed that the victim died about 3 to 4 hours before the reported time of disappearance. This means she could have died that afternoon, not long after leaving Taco Bell. The unusual thing was the neck area. There were no knife marks, no obvious trauma, but there were signs of being squeezed for a short time with enough force to cause suffocation, but no signs of resistance. This led the expert to hypothesize that either the victim was unconscious before being squeezed or was completely restrained. When the forensic team analyzed the skin and fingernails further, they found a small amount of strange DNA, not matching the victim's, trapped in dead cells under the nails. In addition, a short, light-colored hair was found between the folds of the partially burned shirt. But it was another small detail that turned the case around. On the victim's right wrist, her dominant hand, there was a faint circular print that looked like a rope mark, but there was nothing on her left hand. She had been tied, but only on one side. On the morning of January 28, 2005, when the body was identified as Adrianne Reynolds, East Moline police opened a criminal investigation. The initial case was immediately changed from missing person to unexplained death. The first person to be called back was Sarah Kolb. She maintained her story, that the 3 had just had lunch and then split up. However, when asked for details about when she left Taco Bell, Sarah could not remember and gave 3 different times in the same interview that lasted less than an hour. At noon on January 28th, the police brought Corey Gregory back in. Corey seemed nervous, but was more consistent than Sarah in the timing. However, when asked why he had left Adrianne alone in the parking lot, he hesitated and then gave an excuse. She said she wanted to stay and make a phone call. The police immediately checked Adrianne's call records. There were no calls after 12 noon on January 21st. This completely disproved Corey's explanation. On January 29th, a student named Sean McKittrick was called. He said that he had been invited to lunch that day, but Sarah had suddenly canceled the invitation just a few hours before. He found this strange because the group often went to lunch together every week. This was the first time Adrianne had replaced Sean. On the same day, when reviewing the cameras around Taco Bell, the police found a blurry clip of a silver sedan leaving the parking lot, matching Sarah's vehicle. In the frame, 3 silhouettes could be seen entering the car, but only 2 returned later. One in the front seat, one in the back. This contradicted the statement that the 3 parted ways after the meal. On January 30th, the second interrogation took place. This time, the atmosphere in the room was different. Sarah remained silent for most of the time. Corey was more confused. He began to ask, "If I tell you now, will it be considered aiding and abetting?" The police did not answer. They waited, waiting. After a few minutes, Corey sighed. "I didn't kill her, but I didn't stop. I stood there and Sarah used her belt." It was the first confession. Though it was incomplete, it changed the whole story of the case. On January 31st, the police returned to Sarah's grandparents' farm in Aledo, where she had been on the afternoon of January 21st. After several hours of searching, they found a small body part and a hacksaw with biological traces. There were also plastic bags, rubber gloves, and a half-burned lighter box at the scene. The police took all the evidence and sent it for testing. On February 1st, Corey signed a plea agreement with the condition that his sentence would be reduced if he cooperated fully. He told the whole story. Sarah had planned it in advance because of a conflict with Adrianne. In the car, while Adrianne was in the back seat, Sarah used a belt to strangle her from the front. Corey did not intervene. When the victim collapsed, they panicked. Then, the 2 moved the body to the farm to dispose of it. Another friend, Nathan, was asked to help with the rest. This information prompted the police to immediately summon Nathan Godet. After several hours of questioning, Nathan admitted to using a saw to dismember the body at Sarah's request, promising that everything would be fine. He was only 16 years old. In the records, there was a detail that made the investigator freeze. During the confrontation between Sarah and Corey, a recorded interrogation recorded Sarah saying, "I told her to stop, but he still held her hand." Meanwhile, Corey said, "I held her hand, but only because I didn't know what to do." 2 people, 2 testimonies, 1 undeniable truth. Adrianne was defenseless. And the final twist? A belt buckle found at the scene matched the one left in Sarah's purse. She had repaired the strap. No one knew that detail except the owner herself. In October 2005, Sarah Kolb's trial officially began in the Rock Island County Courthouse in Illinois. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former classmates, and relatives of the victim. The case was closely followed by the local media, not only because of its severity, but also because of the age of the defendants. On the first day, the atmosphere became tense. The prosecution presented the testimony of Corey Gregory, who had pleaded guilty and agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. During the trial, Corey repeated his entire confession, claiming that Sarah had initiated the strangulation and that he had acted in a state of panic. However, Sarah's attorneys strongly objected. They argued that Corey's testimony was not credible because he was trying to protect himself by blaming others. They also questioned the legality of using the testimony of a juvenile defendant to convict another juvenile. The surprise came on the 3rd day of the trial when a new witness was called. Sean McKittrick, a classmate at Black Hawk. Sean said that Sarah had repeatedly badmouthed Adrianne in front of her friends and had been upset when Adrianne became close to Corey. This testimony reinforced the theory that personal conflicts led to extreme behavior. The trial lasted nearly a week. The pieces gradually came together. The change in testimony, the evidence found at the farm, the biological traces, and the distinctive belt buckle, all of which formed a clear picture. On February 6, 2006, Sarah Kolb was convicted of 2 counts, first-degree murder and concealment of a body. The total sentence was 53 years in prison, including 48 years for the main charge and an additional 5 years for concealment. When the verdict was announced, Sarah bowed her head in silence. Adrianne's parents burst into tears. In July of the same year, Corey Gregory received a separate sentence, 45 years in prison after agreeing to cooperate with the investigation. He was held at the Pontiac Correctional Center in Illinois. Although the verdict was largely supported by the public, there was mixed opinion about the age of the defendants. Some analysts said that the sentence imposed on the two teenagers was too harsh, especially when psychological and social factors were not fully considered. However, Adrianne's family did not want a lighter sentence. In his final statement to the court, her father said, "No sentence can bring my daughter back, but at least justice has called her name." Adrianne Reynolds did not return home that evening. A 16-year-old girl, full of ambition, just starting to rebuild her life in a new place, passed away silently amidst a spiral of student jealousy and irreversible wrong decisions. The case not only took a young life, but also buried the future of 3 other teenagers. The price of jealousy, silence, and a distorted mentality that was not recognized in time is too high. It makes people ask, how many signs were overlooked? How many people saw something unusual but chose to remain silent? If there were no messages left behind, if the camera at Taco Bell had not accidentally recorded the moment the car left, if a witness had not spoken up in time, would the case have ever been solved? Adrianne's case is a reminder of the importance of surveillance technology, but it also highlights the human role in crime prevention. Being alert to behavioral deviations, especially in school-age children, is something that should not be taken lightly. And ultimately, the question remains, if you were in the room that day, would you have said something or would you have looked away?